Right, it's on. It's on. I have notifications off.
Okay.
Hang on, I don't know how. That's no.
Okay.
Right, that's live now. It's happening. It's happening. We are here. Okay. Well, so good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. We just had lunch. Carted the kids over to the extension, hoping they'll stay out of the way so that we can do this. Friday. What's the date? 16th, 17th,
19th.
Friday the 19th of June, and it's the live Instagram feed thingy. So today what we're going to do is a couple of things. I think Ellen got some publicity out to let everybody know that this was happening, and hopefully this will kind of slowly gather momentum. But what we're going to do today is do a bit of show and tell. I'm going to show you the finished lion's head, and also show you some of the wrap stones that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. I've been doing some work and I got bored with what I was doing, or kind of like run into some difficulties, and at that point I just picked up a stone, or I was kind of putting off work, so I picked up a stone and kind of did some cane wrap stone. And as I said before, this is a Japanese tradition, born out of basket weaving, and the Japanese, being the Japanese, have kind of pushed the material to its limit. And there's been some really, if you go online, you have a check it out, not just basket weaving, but kind of rock wrapping, exquisite, but I mean really, really exquisite examples of pushing the material and the limit, pushing material to its limit. Anyway, I'll show you what we've done. So, what's the best way to do this?
Take them outside.
Okay, so this we put it on the table. We'll put them on the table. Take the ballot papers off the table. Right. So, there you go. There's that one. And I'll go and get the others. And this one, which is kind of, I'll show you the other side of that one. I've got them all here. And this one, and this one. So, if I remember rightly, these two came from Wales, from Maen Clwyd, which is a kind of converted farmhouse in the middle of the world. If you drew a cross on Wales, it's right bang in the middle of the world, bang in the middle of Wales. And this is from a river. It's a river stone, and I think that's where they came from, if I remember rightly. So as you can see, they're rather handsome, and I'm really pleased with how they turned out. So this one, if you can see this one here, and I'll turn it over, it's got rather a kind of slightly constricted, because the shape of the stone, that has a real kind of odd kind of quality to it when you stand it up like that. I wanted to kind of mount that at some point, or do something. Anyway, there's them. Kind of, if you want to turn that around. There you go. And then we can also turn it over, and you'll see like that. There you go. And so, right, we cool?
Yep.
Has anybody got any questions?
Yes, that's beautiful.
No, great. Okay, wonderful. We'll go bob outside. Okay. This is all going to be. All right. First of all, I'll show you this. So here is the finished, rather medieval-looking lion's head. And that's going to be the kind of beginnings of a water feature when we manage to get all the other material cut. I'm going to take the stone that I've got in the workshop down to Marnell Quarry, and Dean said he'd here, really help out with that. There you go. So that's the kind of show and tell. I hope that I was kind of really pleased with it in the end. He's kind of the texture of this. This is kind of. I think I might have said something about this last time about the shape. So the this S shape is not just that way, but it's also up and down as well. And then the line runs over the centre line. So the line kind of, so each time these S shapes are kind of pushing the material so that it looks more dynamic. I mean, obviously it's a static material, but it looks dynamic. There you go. Right, come on, let's right. Okay, has anybody got any tripping over the boys? So this is for Dean. He started cutting letters, and he's doing a job for somebody where he's been asked to cut some small letters. Although I've he's cut some small letters. Now the letters are probably smaller than that in real life, but what I've done is I've drawn them out big, just so that I can explain various things. So what I'm going to touch on is a little bit of information about letter forms, just to explain what makes a beautiful dynamic letter. And these are kind of Roman lowercase, or this is a bit of a Roman E, like that. Then I'll talk to you about chisels and what is an appropriate chisel for the job, and then I'll go through how to cut little tricks that I use and have been taught. So, all right. First of all, these Euro letters. I have a pencil. You got a pencil? That's I want a 10H. No. Oh no, it's a 3B. That's rubbish. So we use Wellard pencils. I might have said this before. We use Wellard pencils. We use 10H pencils in stone masonry and carving, and there we go. And the pencil sharpener's not here. I'll just go and grab it quickly.
So you hold that.
Oh, I can do it.
Carry on, I'll go.
All right. So. Oh, that's no worries. I'm just reading the instructions, reading what people have said. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure I can't make head nor tail of these things. Right. So, oh, you got it, Sam? Got it. Here, I'll give it to you.
That's right. You just hold that.
Okay. I can't really have this thing pointing at me and explain at the same time. Right. Okay, thanks, love. Okay. Brilliant. Alright, so letter forms. So somebody said about kind of explaining ABC, because I can make the mistake of assuming kind of people know stuff that I completely take for granted. So I'm going to try and kind of go from the beginning. So So what happened is in the no, I'm not sure the dates, but early to mid 20th century. What happened is there was a kind of resurgence in traditional lettering, and what I mean by that is lettering Roman letters. So, because what had happened up in that point is lettering had kind of moved further and further and further away from its craft route. So the calligraphic letter and the brushed letter, that some letters have become almost kind of they become really ugly, and then there was a kind of movement which went back to the original letters, and one of the archetype letters, Roman letters, was the Trajan letters on the Trajan column. So they called the Trajan letter, Trajan, Trajan letters, and there's a column in Rome which is all carved all the way up, and at the base of this there's some Roman lettering that's seen as the kind of the archetype of the Roman letter. And what the Romans used to do is they'd have some guy come along and paint the letters onto the stone, and then the letter cutter would come along, the mason would come along, and he would carve all the letters. So it was two guys doing the job, and so the lettering, and the spacing and the composition was all about a painted letter. It's all about a calligraphic letter. So what the Roman so people studied these. I mean, Eric Gill, I think, was one of the people who was kind of in this resurgence, and then out of that came a kind of tradition of kind of Roman letters, all, you know, a kind of people, you know, people working with people anyway. So
So 2 questions. Have you seen the Trojan column in person?
yes, I have.
And the other one is also, what stone was the water feature sculpted from?
The water feature is the lion is made out of a local stone called Chicksgrove. So it's a Chicksgrove, and but that is a really nice bit of Chicksgrove. I like it. I liked it. Really good stone, consistency wise. So Roman letters. Remember, they're a brush letter, so there is movement in them, and so what I. There was a guy up at Gloucester Cathedral who was on a lettering. I went on a lettering course with him. He was on the lettering course, the same lettering course that I was on, and he was incredibly brave. He was actually doing brush letters, so he was using a flat tipped brush. So, you know, like the chisel, but a brush, a flat tipped brush, and he was using that to draw letters on to the stone. Now, that's a one-hit wonder. You get it wrong, and you've got to start again with that letter. But so what I do is I base a drawn letter on a brushed letter. So as you can see, there aren't any. You would think that there would be if you were doing a V, like you have a we do a V. You know, and you think, well, you know, it would be nice if the V, you know, all the lines were not that these lines are straight, but it'd be nice if the lines are straight. But there isn't any life in it. You can read it, it does the job, but there's no this. And as you can see, there's no straight line. You see, we've reconnected now. Yeah, says there's no straight line. So the line of if you drew a straight line straight down here, you'd see that the line starts this side of the line, and then it curves, and there's a waist, and it goes out again, and again curves. There's a waist. And this is reasonably straight, but the outside line is not. There, and then this as well. This isn't straight. There's this kind of kink. It comes down and up. And this comes from the brushed letter. And I suppose what people noticed was how prettier it was. how prettier, how something like that. Anyway, right. So I don't know. So this is interesting. So you although so this E breaks the rules. It although this V, the brush tip would come. You come in like that, and then draw the brush down like that, and then you keep the same angle and you come in and down like that. So that's how your thick and thin is made. But this E, the brush isn't at that angle. The brush is at that angle. So it's thin, thick. There's your thick. Yeah, there's your thick. That's your angle there. But that's your angle there. So the E is broken. Now this is a letter designed by or drawn and designed. I've kind of copied. I've copied it. It's designed by Dean did tell me, and I've forgotten his name. But anyway, it's designed. It's a particular style of E, and you've got thicks and things, and you can see that line isn't thick or thin. And what you must remember, and what's one of the reasons why I'm saying this, is when you cut your letter, which will be a V-cut letter. Yeah. There's that's your surface. Yeah, and there's the bottom of the V-cut. So yeah, this, yeah, is going to be deeper than this. So these lines aren't straight. Yeah, so this is slightly wider, so that's slightly deeper than here. So not even that bottom line, although it's straight that way, it's not straight as in depth. It goes deeper, slightly shallower, and deeper there. So if you do a line across here, you can see that is that wide, and so it will be that deep because you keep the same angle. Yeah, and whereas here at this point, that will be that deep because you're keeping this. I mean, I made, if it's, let's make it life easier so you can see it more easily. So if same angle, keep the same angle. Yeah, you keep the same angle. I'm not sure I've explained that hugely well, but I'll show you as we start cutting the letters. Is there anything? Anybody? Is that reasonably clear? Yeah, okay, now chisels. This is the next important thing. I pulled out a load of chisels of different. There we go. So the chisel that you choose to cut these letters are kind of, you see, look, that one's about right, yeah. Are as wide as the thickness. So that one's slightly, that's right for that letter. That's right for that letter. It's kind of wide as the thickness. And the other thing that you need to be, so that's those are the width of the chisels that you use. The other thing that you need to be concerned about, can you see? So this is it's this angle here is really important. So what happens is this with a softer material, you need a shallower angle. You need to keep it. In fact, with this material, this is about the right angle for that. And this shoulder is what's important, because as you go kind of round a corner, you can knock off these arises, these edges, if you're not careful. You can knock off these edges with this shoulder here. This is called the shoulder. So if it's really steep, which you need, if it's really steep, which you need with a hard material, you use a different technique for cutting it, because if you want to It's difficult without showing you. It's difficult to explain. Yeah, you can. You if you as you chase round a corner, you can kind of spool off this kind of edge if you're not careful. So the more acute the angle, the less likely you are to do that. However, if you've got a harder material, you need to make the angle more obtuse, otherwise it just destroys the end of the chisel. So it's a kind of balancing act, dependent on material and dependent on size of letter. So yeah, the size of letter is the width of the chisel, but also that shoulder makes a difference. But now, so I've got this one. I'm going to use this chisel, and I'm going to cut this E with this chisel because it's just about a little bit small, but it'll do. Yeah. So and I'll sharpen it first, and then I'll cut it, and I'll show you how I cut a big letter, and then I'll cut the big letter, big E, and then I'll cut the little E, just to show you. And I'll cut the big E so that you can see how I do it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll do. How would I do this? I would do it I'll cut that round there. I cut the two thinner bits of the material, yeah, and then I'd cut round here like that, something like that. Yeah, let's see how it goes though. That's kind of generally speaking. Let me show you. How are we doing for time?
It's 25 past.
Blimey. It's gone really quickly. So this is all right. We'll see how far we get. So this is a newish one. There we go. That's quite nice. Quite sharp. And that's not touching the tip. That's kind of just that's the taking down the shoulder of the chisel a little bit, taking down, going. There you go. So, and when you are sharpening something, it's your. I keep on forgetting to explain. I'm making sure that I'm not rocking in any way. I'm just going backwards and forwards. So I've got my angle. You can sometimes see when you want to pick up. Can you see if you look at that? So if you look at that, and I go down to there, at that point, that's where, boom, there, that's the point, boom. There. You can see, right. And then I've got this one. So this is a much finer chisel, a much finer diamond pad. So that's quite coarse. So it's for kind of, and then I'm just going to just take the tip there. Right. So there. Okay. This has taken longer than I imagined. Saying that, I'll probably use a different chisel on this thing. So look, I'll pick that one up. So look, I start in from the end a little bit, because because this is big and I've done a square end on it. I'll show you something that I do with that. So start in, I put the chisel flat to that point, and then you've got 45 degrees. The chisel tip is 45 degrees that way. It's so this is a funny bit of material. It's got lots of flecks of shell and fossils in it. So I have to be a little bit careful I am responding to the material as best I can. So as I run up to this bit of shell, you feel the difference. Go over it. Right, so there's that. And ideally you should be running down the middle of the so I go up to here. Yep. No, I know. I'm just going down the centre of the. So I'm creating the beginnings of my V-cut. So that's almost there with this little fin. Now the end is so right on this corner. So I've created that little stop in it. Can I get the other one? So then I can turn up. So that's a kind of there you go. So you've got your V end stop. And it running, you know, I'm not liking that very much, but there we go. I can tidy that up later. So there we go. We got funny old bit of material this, because it's so shelly. So there we go. This what I'm doing is I've got my 45 degrees and it's going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then it gets shallower and shallower and shallower and shallower as you say. Yeah. Oof. Oof. That was horrible. Can you hear that? That's the shell in it. I'll be really careful running over that. This is one of the things, because stone is a natural material. You've got to. This is why with lettering people use slate, because generally speaking, or Portland. I mean, although this is Portland, it's a bit of a shelly bit of Portland. So can you see, whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to maintain that angle, the angle of the V-cut. And the bottom of the V-cut is in the middle of the letter. And it kind of makes itself, as long as you kind of keep the angle. So we may not have time this week to do the small letters, And ideally, I cut the cross piece of the E before I kind of end up finishing off that, because as you push a chisel through here, you don't want to. I mean, I have to come this way basically, because I've done this. I have to come this way. There you go. And then we have start here on that corner. So if I didn't do that on the end, as I approach this end, it would just kind of blow out of here. You know, it would just blow out of here, and you wouldn't get this really nice sharp V cut in the air, where at this point where the crossbar intersects with the thick, where the thick intersects with the thin. So that these things are what make a letter. You know, if you just about to mess it up. Anyway, is it? Yeah, I can't get in there. So as you can see, I'm chopping and changing with the chisels because it's easier to cut the thins with the small one. And I want to do one thing before we kind of wind it up. It'd be nice to finish the letter, wouldn't it? So this is the same angle as the thick that I was using with the bigger chisel. It's the same. So this is called chasing, and it's a very useful technique for curves, especially cutting curves. You know, rounded letters, and as all of these letters, even this cross piece has got a kind of curve in it, is kind of useful for that. So what I'm going to do, there's something funny about here. There's a kind of soft bit of material. So look, another trick you can use is you can roll the chisel. There you go. And so there you can see that kind of clean, that V there, as this kind of comes into the bigger round.
Okay, does the weight of the hammer matter with lettering?
Yeah, the weight does matter. The weight of this matters. You don't want to be using, you just want to be using the weight of the dummy when you're cutting. You don't want to be having to hit it hard. You don't want to have to be so the technique of the hitting machine, as it were, is all about using the weight of it. So I'm flicking this bit, 500 grams. It's this one of the smallest chisel, smallest dummy that I've got. I'm flicking that and using the weight of it to cut the letters. If it's too light, you end up using your kind of strength, kind of going bang, 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 and you lose control of the weight of the strike. And if it's too heavy, the same thing applies, and that again is to do with size of letter and type of material. So good point. But actually, some of it is down to personal preference. Some people really like. When I first started doing masonry, there was a guy at college who made the biggest, heaviest mallets you could find, and I suspect there was a kind of And I picked one of the bigger, heaviest ones, and I suspect there was a kind of macho kind of, my mallet's bigger than your mallet bollocks, you know.
Also, are your courses running?
They will. Right. They will be running. We are going to Tam and I are going to sort out dates for courses starting in September. So that's when we're going to start. We're going to aim to start in September, and we're going to put a COVID-19 policy in place, and so that people are safe. And yes, that's the aim, to start in September. So all the adverts are going to come up in the next month or so, or the publicity is going to come out in the next month or so. What's up, Tom? What's happening, babe? Can you wait a bit?
Okay, I'll be with you in a second. Okay.
Anyway, so yes, the advertising will come out in the next kind of 2 weeks, something like that, and because we'll confirm kind of proposed dates, and there will be definitely, you know, if courses, unless, because things are a bit uncertain, we are planning to start at the beginning of September. So the short answer is not at the moment, but they will. Right. Okay. So this is not chasing. This is another technique that people use with lettering, and it's called chopping. But I mean, it's kind of. So can you see what I've done here? Where this thin extends into this thick, there's this V that runs down into the bottom. So let me just push this around here. I've got to kind of try and remember not to hurry. We'll finish this when I finish this. Sorry, Dean, I did mean to try and do a smaller letter, but I'm not even sure that the size of the letter that I've done is as small as the letters that you'll be making. I think they're probably more likely the size of those letters. We could show a corner of these. This is a different style of letter. It's sans serif, but basically, and it's done in a different material. So this is a Nabrasina, but this is probably the closest to the size that you're. And there's my hand, close to the size of your letter. So these are about an inch. Size letter that you want, but so I don't know. You'll know when you set it out on the stone how big they'll be. But I want to say, even with the smaller letters, you need to remember this deep, shallow, you know, this thicks and thins, and not to change the angle of the cut. Push that down here. Shallow.
How much practice and hours does it take to be good at doing lettering?
I think the 10,000 hour rule is probably reasonably accurate. But yeah, I think, you know, like, you know, they say in martial arts to become a black belt you need to do 10,000 hours. I think the same with lettering. Certainly I've still got a long way to go. If I start, well, I'll get really miserable if I start comparing myself to some of the people I know who do lettering, because they are just like, it's, especially with composition. Because actually, as far as cutting letters goes, I'm quite competent. but as far as composition and, you know, I still feel like I'm kind of really feeling my way, especially with composition. And some of the compositions that I've seen are just like, you go, oh no, I'm going to get a job stacking shelves in Tesco's. You know, that's it. I look at them and I go, ugh. And the artistry and imagination of some of this. I mean, I think in the army they might call me a bit of a generalist rather than a specialist. You know, as far as stonemasonry goes. But then I know the Ollie Coe, who is, he's been a stonemason forever. He, who runs a company out of Wales called Coe Stone Company. He's one of these sickening human beings who's just very good at everything. I mean, carving, lettering, composition, inscriptions, you know, general, you know, like if you ask him to build a wall out of kind of marshmallows and he'd be able to do it. Anyway. Luckily he's in Wales. Right, so as you can see, it's getting thicker. I mean, as the stroke gets wider, the bottom of the bottom of the letter slow down over that so that I don't damage that. But, yeah. There you go. Shallow. Oops. There. Get in there. So that's reasonably, I could mess about with it for a while longer, but I think we've been going for long enough. There you go. You can see that reasonably. I hope that was kind of instructive in some ways. Oh, you want to draw a line? What were you going to say? Oh, do all that. Draw a line in there. So you can see there, if I draw a line there, there's your base, down, up. Sort of there. There, and then you can see up there. Does that make it easier to see? Okay. Oh yeah, before we go, here is some cane. So Tam and I are going to go down, find some rocks that we like. This is the cane that I used to wrap the rock with. And hey Tom, it's alright, we're going to pack it up soon. And then this is some hessian that I bought as well. And I thought I might wrap some stones with some hessian. You back up? So, I'm better say goodbye. Tom's looking visible. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm getting the put your thumbs up, Henry from Tam. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Have a lovely week, and I will see you next week. Cheers.